Hello, this is a sermon for Sunday the 25th of June 2023. That will be the 12th Sunday in Ordinary Time, Year A. The readings are Jeremiah chapter 20 verses 7 to 13 and Matthew chapter 10 verses 24 to 39. Today's sermon is pretty much a convoluted history lesson really on the story of Jeremiah's ministry. And we pick up that story of Jeremiah's ministry in chapter 20. Jeremiah felt utterly betrayed by God. "O Lord, you deceived me, and I was deceived," reproaches an angry Jeremiah. This sense of disillusionment had not come overnight. It had been building for a while. It had all started about 40 years before. In approximately 637 BC, Jeremiah had received his first vision as a young man. He had seen a pot boiling, with its steam being blown away by a northern breeze. He told the equally juvenile King Josiah that destruction would come upon Judah from the north unless the people came back to God. At the time, this made no sense. Assyria had been a potent force when it had destroyed the northern kingdom in 721 BC and had briefly threatened Judah in 701 BC. But there was little threat in Jeremiah's day, 64 years later. So Jeremiah tried again. He bought a new waistcoat and buried it far to the north in the banks of the Euphrates, near the ancient city of Babylon. He brought it back, soiled and crumpled. Like the waistcoat that clings so closely to the body, so God fashioned Judah to cling to him. But now they are soiled and useless. Like this waistcoat dipped in a foreign river, they have bathed in their foreign gods. This persuaded Josiah, and so he embarked upon his famous King Josiah's reform in 632 BC, abolishing foreign altars and centering worship under his watchful eye at the temple in Jerusalem. The reform was boosted 10 years later when the builders discovered the book of Deuteronomy laying forgotten in the temple in 622 BC. Jeremiah had won the day. A young prophet had renewed his nation in partnership with his young king. So Jeremiah went into retirement for the next 10 years. Then, suddenly, it all started to go wrong. Josiah took the wrong advice. He was taken in by the prophetic hotheads of the day, who scorned Jeremiah's dire warnings about trouble from the north. So when Egypt from the south decided to travel north through Judah in order to come to the aid of its northern ally, Assyria, who was being threatened by a new emerging power, the Babylonians, Josiah took it upon himself to refuse Pharaoh's army free passage. In 609 BC, Josiah was killed by the Egyptians at the Battle of Megiddo, in a fight he should never have started. Pharaoh Necho placed one of Josiah's sons on the throne, Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim, sucking up to the Egyptians, started reversing many of the reforms of his father. Jeremiah felt like he had to start again. "You'll be dead meat and buried alongside another ass," quipped Jeremiah. Jehoiakim took no notice. Then, 4 years later, in 605 BC, the mighty Egyptians and their Assyrian allies were unexpectedly defeated by the up-and-coming Babylonian general Nebuchadnezzar. In Babylon's eyes, Judah was just a small Egyptian ally which could be gobbled up at will. Jeremiah suddenly saw the imminent fulfillment of his old prophecy of destruction coming from the north, from the very place he had once buried his waistcoat. "The sins of Judah are written on our hearts with a pen of iron," said Jeremiah. And he bought a pot and smashed it to pieces on the ground, saying, "So will Judah be broken." Then, at the 11th hour, as Nebuchadnezzar's army approached the gates of Jerusalem, he withdrew, leaving Jerusalem as miraculously saved as 90 years earlier, when Sennacherib's Assyrian army had also fled from besieging the city walls, when visited by the angel of the Lord. No wonder they thought Jerusalem inviolable and chanted, "This is the temple of the Lord, this is the temple of the Lord," as if no harm could ever befall the city. This is the reason for Jeremiah's sense of betrayal in chapter 20. For 39 years he had been ridiculed for passing on what he believed to be a genuine prophecy about destruction coming from the north. Now, just as it was looking about to reach fulfillment at the hands of the Babylonians, they withdrew from the battle, leaving Jeremiah looking a complete fool yet again. They nicknamed Jeremiah Terror on Every Side and laughed at him. Freedom had come from the north, no destruction, because by Babylon defeating the Egyptian-Assyrian alliance, Judah had been freed from Egyptian domination. At least that's how it looked. Jeremiah accuses God of deceiving him. He's angry and feels betrayed. However, Jeremiah had not been deceived by God. For within a year, Nebuchadnezzar was back with his army. It transpired that Nebuchadnezzar had suddenly broken off the siege and gone home when news reached him of his father's death. Jeremiah's opponents had claimed victory too soon. Instead of paying the Egyptians, Jehoiakim had to pay heavy tribute money to the Babylonians from then on. In the 4th year of paying tribute to Babylon, Jehoiakim decided to withhold tribute, much against Jeremiah's advice. But Nebuchadnezzar had just lost most of his chariots in another battle with Egypt, and the Babylonians were considered too weak to enforce their rule. On the 9th of December, 598 BC, a re-equipped Nebuchadnezzar appeared outside Jerusalem looking for his money. Jehoiakim died of shock. His son, Jehoiachin, took the throne, but after a siege of 3 months and 10 days, the city fell. On the 15th of March, 597 BC, Jehoiachin and many of Jerusalem's elite were taken in chains to Babylon. One of them was the prophet Ezekiel. One of Josiah's sons, Jehoiachin's uncle, Zedekiah, was placed on the throne and told by Jeremiah to keep up the payments this time. Jeremiah was hated by his countrymen for being right. Zedekiah respected him, but the other prophets accused Jeremiah of defeatism and lack of patriotic faith in God. "Trust God," said Jeremiah, "not in false prophets or military alliances." Jeremiah took to wearing a yoke around his neck in the streets to depict their fate if ever Zedekiah should make the same mistake as his brother Jehoiakim and refuse tribute. When the false prophet Hananiah broke the wooden yoke, Jeremiah made one out of iron. Babylon's yoke is not so easily broken, warned Jeremiah. Eventually, Zedekiah, like both his father Josiah and his brother Jehoiakim before him, took the wrong advice, and after 10 years of tribute money, he refused to pay. Jeremiah had been warning Judah for 50 years of the consequences of trusting in shaky military alliances rather than trusting in God. Now, at last, destruction was coming from the north, as the Babylonians, finally losing their patience, came to dethrone Zedekiah, ransack the city, and take all they could as slaves back to Babylon to join their compatriots already there from the first deportation. But after 50 years of predicting destruction and death, just as everyone was coming to see that Jeremiah had been right all along, and the Babylonians were returning to sort Judah out once and for all in 587 BC, Jeremiah suddenly changed his tune. Finally, on the eve of being vindicated, Jeremiah started promising that the coming exile would not be the end of Judah after all. It was a complete volte-face. A remnant shall return, he promised, and in faith that one day Judah would rise again, Jeremiah went out and bought a field. He also promised a new covenant, written on the people's hearts, in the place where their sins had once been written with a pen of iron. When the city finally fell in August 587 BC, Jeremiah, freed by Nebuchadnezzar for having tried to keep Zedekiah faithful to his obligations, decided to go to Egypt into voluntary exile. Now, the reason I think it's worth seeing these long-term ebbs and flows in Jeremiah's prophetic career, spanning 50 years, is because he makes such a powerful example of what was to befall the Christian apostles. They too would know more of defeat than success. Most would lose their lives at the hands of imperial Rome. They would be deemed unpatriotic for refusing to join the zealots' messianic uprising against Rome. They too would be thought of as defeatist. They too would appear to promise a coming kingdom with a victorious Jesus that many said they failed to see. The conditions facing those sent out by Christ is made plain in Matthew 10, verses 24 to 39. If Jesus is accused of being Beelzebub, his followers can expect nothing less. But the apostles are told they should not fear death, for the opponents of Jesus can only kill the body. The apostles are assured that God knows of their plight, knows of the challenges and dangers they face, but has counted each hair upon their head as a symbol of how closely God watches over them and can be relied upon in every time of danger. For troubles without number surround me, my sins have overtaken me, and I cannot see. They are more than the hairs of my head, and my heart fails within me. Psalm 40, verse 12. Troubles will be matched by blessings, assures Jesus. When the path of witness is long, dangerous, and apparently without great success, it is tempting to think God has abandoned us, or that it is not worth the pain. Jesus urges his followers to remain faithful. The world will be divided in its response to their gospel message. Their message of peace will in fact be like a sword that splits fathers from sons and mothers from daughters. The way that lies ahead for the church is one of strife, hardship, confrontation and pain. But the loss of one's earthly prospects is actually the way to finding one's life. Whilst those who forsake Christ and make an alliance with the world instead, these may look as though they have made a wise move, but in fact, they are the ones who have lost everything. They just don't know it yet.